Today's guest, Greg Lawson, forensic investigator and author of Roswell, The After Action Report. Let's talk UFOs today on the Open Highway.
Oh my God, John, were you up on Wikipedia all night?
John, are you okay? You're shaking.
You guys, you will not believe what I just read on Wiki. Welcome to Reddit on Wiki, the poorly researched, semi-funny podcast on random stuff we find on the internet.
Who are you talking to?
And why are you shaking so much?
Subscribe to Reddit on Wiki on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Sean, I'm scared.
Me too, buddy. Me too.
The Open Highway with Eric Erickson.
I'm taping this because you're saying good shit.
Oh, okay.
That's just the way it is. So
Yeah,
what?
so that guitar there, I got that in like 1984, I guess, 1983, something like that.
Okay.
And played it for a little while, and then I went in the Army and ended up sticking it in my sister's attic. And I forgot about it. And like 25 years later, my sister's like, "Hey, can you help me move some stuff out of my attic?" Off subject a little bit. She was a court reporter. And back when she was a court reporter, they actually kept evidence of cases.
Mm-hmm.
Is that not the most insane thing ever? In Texas, court reporters were responsible for keeping certain types of evidence for certain types of cases. She had guns, knives, all kinds of stuff in her attic. In these, I was like, chain of custody here? Hello? But anyway,
Well, it's Texas. It is Texas.
Crazy, man.
Everything's a little different in Texas.
It was crazy. So
Is
I got
that one
up there
signed though? Is the one, not to interrupt you, but like there's one, is that one signed?
So that one there, it's signed by everybody that played with my brother and that came to his funeral. So
Well, that's cool and depressing at the same time.
Yeah, I know. Right. And yeah, they we decided to have his kind of funeral / memorial at a tavern that he used to play at. It's Riley's Tavern. It's got it's the oldest legal drinking establishment in Texas. Has the license. The Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission license is 0001. So he used to play out there, and he played with a bunch of famous people and stuff. So we had his memorial out there, and yeah, everybody signed it. And of course, the drummer signed the biggest signature on the guitar as the drummer.
Well, yeah, the drummer's got to get noticed at some point. It's either them or the bass player. It's always one of them.
Anyway, that little where in the hell am I pointing? That guitar, it's set up in the attic, like 130 degrees for 25 summers in Texas. And it dried that wood out, and it's got a crazy resonance that none of the other. It's a little cheap. I think I paid maybe $200 for it in 83 or 84, but it's got a really unique sound to it. Sometimes I throw a little single coil pickup in it and play it, and it's it's pretty cool.
But it didn't crack though.
It didn't crack at all. It's crazy. The neck didn't bend. I didn't do anything to it.
That's insane. I've seen ones crack that have been in much better conditions. So, wow. Yeah. So people are thinking that you're a musician at this point after the first couple minutes of our conversation, but believe it or not, you and I have a mutual connection, which is why I reached out to you, because I used to work for the Roswell Daily Record, the newspaper.
Right.
And I didn't chase aliens, but you did.
I did.
Is kind of a little segue there. So you're a forensic investigator, correct?
So I was a major crimes detective. I was a child abuse detective. I was a persons crimes detective. Did a little bit of burglary detecting, and then the rest of the time, just different stuff in law enforcement.
Where was that?
It was in Central Texas.
Okay, so are you born and raised in Texas?
I was not. I was born in Kentucky. My dad was a used car salesman. And so we moved around a lot. We got kicked out of any decent town, we ended up in Central Texas.
So
So
you
we
Davy Crocketed it. You made it down
yeah,
to.
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Very short time in Kentucky, very short time in Louisiana and Lake Charles, and then ended up in Austin.
Okay, and then you got into law enforcement. How did that happen? How did you get
Yeah.
into that?
So everybody pretty much in my family is an artist of some sort. And that's what my plan was. My father was a car salesman. He was a little bit more than a used car salesman, but he owned a Ford dealership back in the 80s, 80, anyway, mid 70s to early 80s. And people who haven't been alive long enough don't remember this, but we had a big crash then. And all of the car dealers went in the hole.
Yeah.
And Ford and Chrysler were the two that got hit the worst. And back then, you failed if you were a business. The government didn't prop you up. So what they ended up having to do is file bankruptcy and then restructure. And my dad, I grew up with my dad, and my plan is I was going to be an artist, and he was going to fund that for me because artists don't make a lot of money. And all of a sudden the money disappeared. So I didn't have the grade point average to make it into a decent college or university. And, just things went. I tried to get a job, couldn't get a job. There was no jobs out there, and you couldn't go on unemployment like you can today or could today with all the COVID thing. And so I ended up going into the Army. And so I did my time in the Army. When I got out of the Army, I went back to school to be an artist again, and didn't have any money. And my sister said, "Hey, the sheriff's office over there is hiring. Why don't you just go over there and get a job? And then you can put yourself through school." And, 40 years later.
And here you are.
Yeah.
What was the art? Was it the music when you refer to art?
No.
What did you do?
So I know enough chords to fill up the background. I can kind of make things interesting in the background. I don't do lead or anything like that. I write very obscure songs, and people look at me and go, "What?" But yeah, it was sculpture and painting.
Oh, okay. Okay. So we have another thing in common too. So we haven't even got to the UFOs yet, and we're already like one after another. I used to work in the music industry. We got the art. Dang, this might be a long conversation.
Well, the thing about it is there's wanting to be an artist of some sort, and then there's talent, and so it's like, all right, I'm going to need to work a lot harder than most people to do anything in this field. So.
Yeah, part of that's the tastemakers though too. I mean, there are people out there who unfortunately their job is to say whether or not you are talented, and somehow they open the gates and then you're on. So it's an unfortunate part of music or art or pretty much anything. So how do you get into law enforcement, and then suddenly you have this book on the Roswell crash? How does that go from one place to that? How does that happen?
Nothing happens suddenly. None of that happened. So it was a long, drawn out, miserable process.
Okay.
So I got into the paranormal because my brother, he was 12 years older than me. So when I was 5, he was 17, and he had a Triumph Bonneville motorcycle, and he would throw me on the gas tank with no helmet, and we'd go riding around, and he'd take me to graveyards, cemeteries, and like abandoned buildings and stuff, and just tell me stories and scare the crap out of me, and so I kind of always was interested in horror, sci-fi, that sort of stuff, and so when I was in junior high and high school, we were doing ghost hunting stuff. We were doing the stuff that they're doing on TV now back in the 70s, but we didn't know it was a thing. You know, we just went and did it, and everybody made fun of us for doing it. And that was pretty much it. And then when I went in the Army, whenever I would travel, I got to go to quite a few different countries. I was with the 82nd Airborne Division, so we were forward deployed quite a bit. And so whenever I would get time off, I would break away from everybody and try to go figure out what the weird thing was wherever we were. After I got out of the Army, then I go into law enforcement. I worked in mental health for a couple of years as a mental health investigator. You do suicide mediations, hostage negotiation, and then you also do investigations on people who are having some sort of mental episode, hearing voices, seeing things, that sort of stuff. So I interviewed a lot of people then that professed that they had been abductees for, you know, like kind of alien abduction type stuff, and they would describe the things that they would go through. So that interests me that much more. So, you know, it kind of branched off from the Army, and I was like, hey, this is cool Bigfoot stuff. And from my kid times, a lot of ghost stuff. And then as a professional investigator, investigating people who are claiming alien abductions and that sort of thing. And so needless to say, somewhere along the line, my wife and I started going to Roswell because she had a friend that lived up there, and we would just go all the time whenever there was the UFO festival. At that point, I got to know everybody and started interviewing a lot of people and listening. And I had all this stacks and stacks of stuff on my bedside table on my desk. You know, I look like the creepy guy in his grandma's basement with his, you know, her ball of twine. And he's like going from this guy to this person to this thing to, you know, this experience. And, you know, I'm like, I got to get this crap off my desk, man. It's driving me insane.
If some kid disappears in your neighborhood, you're the first person they're going to go after. You know that. He seemed like such a normal guy.
Yeah, he was a nice guy. He always hung out in his garage all the time, and I'm not sure what was going on.
So you got to Roswell. Do you consider now? Okay, so let's clear this part up. So your approach is through forensics and through logic, right? It's through the discovery process, right? That you would use on a case. It's the same kind of approach, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So do you consider yourself a skeptic? Do you consider yourself just open to proof? How do you categorize yourself?
So there's a part of me that is open because I want to believe. Like the t-shirt.
I was waiting for that. I was
like
waiting
the bumper
for that.
sticker says, right?
Way to go, Mulder.
But you can't be an investigator and not be a skeptic. And I always describe it, if you had a continuum, a line, one side is gullible, you believe everything. You're a true believer no matter what ridiculous notion is going on. And the other side is cynic. And you're going to discount any experience for anybody and just say, they're having a psychological episode, they're making it up, they're screwed up. Well, a skeptic is here in the middle, and he's floating around in the middle, evaluating statements, evaluating evidence, evaluating circumstances, evaluating history, demonstrations. You're evaluating all of this, trying to make a determination out of it. And where I find most of my investigations that are the most interesting are the ones that I can't prove one way or another. I find that truly interesting. And you know, if any of us could go in and prove alien, well, you're going to have to give me an alien. You're going to have to give me alien technology. Ghost, you're going to have to recreate that. It's a scientific method, right? I love all these people that are like, I'm going to use a scientific method on this ghost hunting thing and whatever. Well, scientific method has to do with normal. Ghost is paranormal.
Right.
So what are we really looking for? Are you telling me that the paranormal is somehow affecting the normal, and the residual of the paranormal that affects the normal is what we're looking for that will prove the paranormal? I'm really confused at this point.
Yeah, because it's paranormal. I mean, if you're looking at it, then you're dealing with something. Let's just, for the sake of this discussion, say that something paranormal exists. Well, it doesn't adhere by its existence to the normal rules of this world.
Right.
That's part of the whole argument. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about Bigfoot or ghosts or UFOs or anything. You suddenly are looking at different physics. You're looking at a different universe potentially of all these things. So for us to say, okay, well, it behaves by the rules that we have here, right there, you're running into an issue trying to prove it by that. Look at some of the UFO sightings that have come out recently with the Tic Tacs are a great example of, so they're like, well, they're not behaving by our physics. Okay, well, then you have to explain, is it real? Is it not? Is it different physics? Is it some kind of lack of propulsion? What is it? Anybody who says, well, I got it figured out because I took level A science, well, it doesn't really work that way, does it?
Right. And I get cornered on a lot of those videos, and people say, so, did you see that video? Did you see the video that was taken, by the aircraft that was off Nimitz? For those that don't know or even care, I did 4 years Army, 4 years Navy, and 2 years Air Force because I have Armed Forces Attention Deficit Disorder. And people are like,
that took me a second.
Yeah. So you could do that. I'm like, yeah, if you pass the test, and they to pass your background, it's like, yeah, sign here. What's for lunch? I don't know. Where are we going? I don't know. So yeah, I enjoyed my time. I enjoyed my time doing that. But I also learned a lot when I was in the Navy. I was an operations specialist. I worked in the Combat Direction Center on Nimitz. I didn't hold a real high clearance, but I did hold a clearance. So I got to see some interesting things. And also, when you're doing that sort of work, there's all kinds of training that you have to go through. And so I've gone through some navigation laboratories, and in a lot of that, you learn trigonometry, if you didn't already know it. And so people say, what do you think of those Tic Tac things? It's like, you say, it looks, they're zooming back and forth. They're doing this. You'd have to really look at that video. You'd have to slow it down. You'd have to use some trigonometry, because I want you to think about something for just a minute. You're on the ground and you're driving in your car, and you look up and there's an airplane just floating there. It's not moving at all. Mm-hmm. You're like, oh my God, how's it doing that? It's called trigonometry. The way that you're looking, the way your car is moving, the way that the aircraft is moving, it's not creating any movement in the background. So therefore, it makes it look like it's staying in one spot.
The reference points aren't working with you in order to create movement, right? Okay.
Yeah. And so if you are taking a video and you're on an airborne platform and you're moving at 400 miles an hour, and you have background that's moving also, and you have a stationary object that you're moving by, it makes that object look like it's going very fast. Mm-hmm. So I'm not, minimizing what these things are. I'm not minimizing what the pilots said they were or looked like or anything else. I think it's very interesting. It's certainly very, very compelling. It's very interesting that there's no heat signatures coming off of it. Doing air intercept control and doing identify friend or foe type work. There's ways that we identify aircraft that are flying, and there's all kinds of frequencies that are coming off of both radio frequency and heat signatures and all kinds of stuff. And so when you have no frequencies coming off of this thing, that's very compelling, and it makes you wonder what's going on. So it would take somebody a lot smarter than me that has a better grasp of trig than I do to actually sit down and look at those videos and figure out whether that little Tic Tac was actually moving or not.
What do you think about Neil deGrasse Tyson came out and he made a bunch of statements after seeing them and was saying, well, it could be the equipment, it could be the data, we don't know, it could be misinterpreted, it could be the tech.
It could be.
What do you think of that?
Yeah, it could be misinterpreted. It's not the equipment, it's not the data. I'm not sure where he's coming up with that. And he is a genius who I love dearly. Neil deGrasse Tyson's an awesome
the skeptic,
dude,
the clinic he also makes the comment all the time that it's like, we're not that interesting as a species that somebody would want to come check us out. And I have to disagree with that. I think every species is interesting to another species, especially when we're almost killing ourselves every couple of years with something.
Everybody
think somebody would want to
right?
Exactly. The aliens are sitting there with popcorn, God, look what they did on this week's show. Yeah. You got to wonder about that. But let's go back to Roswell. When you first got there, when you first made your first I was stuck there. I was employed.
I've drug you all the way over there.
I know. I'm in LA now. I just, people are like, do you want to go back? I'm like, no. What did you think when you first got there? Because the thing that I try to instill in people is they think that Roswell, they think of the TV shows. They're like, oh, it's this cool place with hip teenagers and clubs and whatever. And I'm like, no, it's a tiny little tourist town with a lot of trailers and a meth problem. That's pretty much Roswell. We would cover, at least on a weekly basis when I was at the newspaper, an explosion from a meth lab. It was a weekly thing. It's not a wonderful place. Nothing against anyone who lives there, nothing against anyone who's had a family there or a lifetime there. I'm not taking that away. I'm just saying it's not this idealized place that many people make it to be. And they also live off of the legend of the UFO. I mean, the dang lampposts are shaped like alien heads when you drive down Main Street, the UFO museum and all of that. What were you expecting something the first time you went out there?
So the first time I went out there, I knew about the Roswell thing from the Unsolved Mysteries episode back in the late 80s, early 90s, whenever I saw it. Mm-hmm. And hey, buddy, can you hear my boy over there?
I can hear someone.
Yeah, it's my cat. Hey, buddy.
Special guest.
Up here, I'll introduce you to my cat. But I knew about Roswell from the original, Unsolved Mysteries episodes, but it was the reason we actually went there was for the Hatch Chili Festival, which is a week before July 4th weekend, which is always, of course, the Roswell UFO Festival.
Yeah.
So the following year, I was like, hey, we got to go back to the Roswell UFO Festival. That'll be good. And that's when we started really going. And that's where I was spending a lot of time at the hotels, a lot of time at the convention center, a lot of time at the visitors bureau, and a lot of time at the museum. And I was trying to, kind of get to meet a lot of the people, because I was truly interested in this. This is a very, very compelling case. And having spent a lot of time in the military, I was enlisted. I was not an officer, so I didn't have that level of secrecy or that level of involvement. But I really, really enjoyed going to Roswell and having fun.
So you didn't have the access in the military, right. but you understood how the machine worked. You understand what is said, what's not said. Yeah.
Yeah, I sat back and watched a lot of the train wreck kind of stuff that would happen in the military, that I'm just standing there scratching my head and going, you're doing what? Why are we doing this? It's just very bizarre. So, that's what really interests me in it, is, well, like, these are a whole bunch of guys that have decided to agree on a story. Mm-hmm. So I started reading a lot of the stuff, Tom Carey and Don Schmidt stuff, a lot of the old school guys that originally started investigating this, and looking at the way that they investigated. I'm like, well, you can't blame somebody for what they don't know. Right. So if they're not a trained investigator, if they're not making a living doing it, if they haven't gone through school, if they haven't gone through technical training, if they haven't got certifications, they're doing the best they can. So a lot of this stuff that they got could be impeached because, you walk into a cafe and go, "Hey, my name is Greg Lawson. I am a published author, and I'm looking for anybody in here that might know about the UFO crash at Roswell. I'd like to put you in my book. Anybody?" You got 20 people,
Yep.
raising their hand, go, "Oh yeah, I heard about this," or the people that just make stuff up. And I always give the example of the yogurt shop murders in Austin. 4 girls were brutally murdered and caught on fire at a yogurt shop. And during the investigation, over 40 people came forward to admit that they're the ones that did it. So you're not only having to figure out what really happened, you're having to figure out who didn't do it that are saying they did do it.
Yeah.
So it gets pretty complex.
So as you started diving into it, was there anything that you jettisoned right away? As you're like, "Oh, that's bullshit." Were there certain stories or parts of the legend that you looked at and just went, "Yeah, nah, I don't think so." Like what? As somebody who had to live with this stuff, what did you tell me?
Well, Ragsdale's whole deal, with Trudy True Love, he's out with his girlfriend and watches. Was that
the nurse, or was that
no? That's Naomi Self.
Oh, okay.
That's from Glenn Dennis. Yeah, there were so many different things, and I like Glenn Dennis. I never met the man, but his story was great. Typically, when you have somebody that has the whole story, the beginning, the middle, and the end, and all the answers to everything,
it's too good. It's just too good.
And so a lot of his stuff, he never thought that anybody would really look off into it. Well, you got a bunch of people looking off into his explanations. And, he says there's this nurse at the hospital that sees an alien autopsy and tells him, he needs to leave, and gives him drawings. And he says her name, and then, she's moved, she got transferred. She went over to, to Europe. She died in a plane crash. Well, that really wasn't her name because I was trying to, protect her identity and all, just go down this schizophrenic story of everything changing and explaining away why everything's changed.
Yeah.
The thing about it is, the thing I learned about being a mental health investigator is you go and you talk to somebody who has a background of mental illness. They have a history of hallucinations, auditory and visual. They have grandiose delusions. They have all these things. You do your investigation. There's a lot of cops that'll go, "I'm not listening to this guy. This guy's crazy. He's not a danger to himself or anybody else, so I'm just leaving." And he closes the card and leaves. Well, that doesn't mean he didn't experience what he's saying. So you need to take the whole story, and you need to listen to it and evaluate it properly. We're not live, are we?
Nope. Do you need to deal with?
Can we pause this? Yeah, I was going to lock the cat up, and he's driving me insane.
Take a second. I'll be here.
Yeah, I was going to do that before we got started, and we just got.
Oh, good. The magic of editing. We'll just cut around it. Let's go to. So I think it's interesting what you said about the people believe what they want to believe. I mean, there could be a kernel of truth in there. And isn't that part of the investigator's job to still sift through the information to find out if there are facts in there that are being clouded by this person's interpretation or their mental state? I mean, that's still part of the pursuit.
Right. And the really unfortunate thing about that is a lot of times cops, because they've been doing it for such a long time or whatever, they get very jaded and very narrow-minded. Yeah. And they walk into an investigation, they take a snapshot of what it all is, and they got it in their mind of what's going to, what happened. And then they build their case to prove what their idea is.
Oh, yeah. I saw that all the time when I was a police reporter in Chicago. That would happen all the time.
Horrible way to do business. You wonder why people get thrown in jail that, probably shouldn't be there. It's because cops do that. And
it fit the narrative.
Yeah. And any decent cop out there will be in my boat and say, yeah, those kind of cops need to be disciplined. They need to be retrained, or they need to get the hell out of the job because they're not doing the job. They might be really efficient and really proud of themselves, but I've seen murder cases get overlooked because this guy's like, oh no, that's this, you know, it was this accident. It was a suicide. It was a drowning. It was whatever. And it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason is because that the perpetrator is not identified is because the cop is just narrow-minded. So
yeah, I've seen it a million times. It always goes
Oh, yeah.
down like this.
Yep.
Yeah, we have that a lot. And then as a reporter or an investigator, you have to keep pushing against that. You become kind of the enemy sometimes because they're like, well, wait a minute, I wrapped this up in a nice little bow. I don't want to do any more paperwork. How dare you ask me questions about everything that I've compartmentalized?
Oh yeah, man. Yeah.
You know.
Live with
So 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 we talked about some of the ancillary people on the other stories that came out. What about the big guy in the middle? What about Marcel? What about Jesse Marcel?
Once again, a lot of people have come out of the woodwork to discredit Jesse Marcel. There's questions of his education. There's questions of his military service. There's questions of awards that he received or didn't receive. His story didn't change a lot. Stories will evolve. The more you interview somebody, the more, details you will get out of it. The question is are these details being fabricated? Because the way our minds work, we try to make sense of things.
Mm-hmm.
And you go over it and over it and over it and over it and over it, and little things start popping in there to try to make sense of certain things. And the thing about his, it didn't change drastically. There was a couple of little things in there that changed, but for the most part, he stuck with it. He could have been like, Glenn Dennis, and when there was a question, he provided the answer. There was a lot of people that were involved in all that through the years would throw out another little thing to the point of, all of a sudden there's a spaceship in the hangar and there's 4 aliens there and they showed them to me, and, deathbed confessions and all this stuff.
Yeah.
He could have done that. And he could have made up all kinds of grandiose things, but he didn't. He stuck with his little foil sticks and circumstances, right?
Yeah.
And
he's he's a military guy. I mean, he was career military, wasn't he? He wasn't.
No, he ended up getting out shortly after all this, but nothing had nothing to do with this. It was a personal matter.
Okay.
That he ended up getting out.
But still, he's dealing with and I use this term because for brevity, the bureaucracy of the military, the machine of the military. He got ground up in that, if some people believe, because they came out, they put out, we found a UFO, and then supposedly, and then suddenly they came out and said, no, we didn't. Here's what you found. And the story goes, he walked into the room and he looked at what was on the floor and he's like, no, that's not. But he was a good soldier and he smiled for the cameras. And there's that Kyle MacLachlan movie, the recreation, the HBO dramatized version of the event. And I always thought, no matter how you feel about it, there's this moment where MacLachlan walks into the room and he looks around and he's just like, what the fuck is this? This is not this isn't what I thought it was. And he represents it so well. And I kind of always felt that's, if this went down the way it did, even if it didn't, even if it turned out that it was some secret weather balloon or it was this or that, Jesse's always maintained, he's like, what I saw in that room was not what I found out on Mac's ranch. It was different.
Right.
And you can have the argument about what it was, but he definitely was adamant wasn't the same stuff.
Right. And contrary to that, Irving Newton, the weather officer, warrant officer that they called in, He had nothing to do with anything. He's the weather officer there in Fort Worth. They decided to call him in to identify for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram article that this was weather balloon. And he walks in and he giggles and was like, yeah, this is a weather balloon. Y'all thought this was a flying saucer? Oh, let's take some pictures. So he poses there. Of course he wouldn't know that that's not what Marcel brought in, because he didn't have anything to do with it. He just came in to identify that this was weather balloon material. And he did. The problem is Marcel says that that's not the material he brought in. The other problem is later, Irving Newton does a statement that Marcel at the time tried to talk him into believing that this was the material that he brought in and that it wasn't balloon material, which is a big, that stops all the wheels from going anywhere if that happened. But Marcel says it didn't happen. Newton said it did.
How long after was that? Do you know when he came out and said that?
That Newton said, it would have been his original statement. I think in 94, 90.
Okay, so it was later.
95.
That's one thing I've always found interesting.
Actually, that might have. I'm sorry, I don't have it.
No.
It might have been a little bit before that. If they would have, I don't know what the date was on that.
But it wasn't like the next week. It's not. It wasn't like right out.
It would have been 31 plus years later.
Yeah. See, that's one that, like, another guy that has always fascinated me is Bob Lazar. Like, his story has always fascinated me because he's never changed. It's never, it evolved a little bit, but it was only because I think he felt a little safer to reveal a little more information. It wasn't that he changed the whole thing.
Right.
And, if you have that consistency, even if the core story, you want to be skeptical about the core story, like you said about the psychosis, it's like it's not like he woke up on Tuesday and said they were from Venus, and he woke up on Wednesday and said they were from Mars, and then took it all back on Thursday. There's at least a consistency to the story. Did you go to the museum when you were in Roswell?
Oh yeah.
What did you think? What did you think? The old movie museum thing?
Yeah. So I like the museum. I think it's really cool the way that they have it all set up. Everything's pretty much of a question. This is all the stuff that happens. They kind of present the evidence. It's not necessarily saying that it was a flying saucer, but they of course allude to or point you that way.
Yeah.
I like
it's like Ancient Aliens.
Huh?
It's like the show Ancient Aliens.
Yeah.
What if?
Yeah. Yeah. It's good stuff, man. I really they don't have that much more evidence or material or anything to present there. It pretty much tells the story. I think it leaves some of the stuff out, but maybe it's inconsequential at that point. Yeah, I mean, for the average person that doesn't know anything about Roswell, it's a good place to go in there and just do Roswell 101. Yeah. This is the way things happen. And the big thing was, of course, you said you work for the Roswell newspaper, Roswell Daily Record, when it goes and it changes the actual, press release from, disc to captured flying saucer. Recovered a disc, captured flying saucer sounds a lot cooler.
Mm-hmm.
So when the media comes in and changes the narrative of what happens, it's interesting on how that fueled things. And of course, it's really interesting the way they shut it down too, because they shut it down pretty quick.
It was a different time. It was a time when you could shut it down really quickly, right. Or you could, there was never any secret. Like, when I was at the Roswell Record, it was like no one ever came in and said, okay, well, here's what went down that day. Here's why we changed the story. Here's why we did this. It was just kind of like, yeah, it's part of our culture, and but we're journalists, and be honest about everything. But it's just an odd place to be, because it's so woven into the makeup of the town.
Right.
And it's dependent on that. It's like going to Vegas and suddenly they don't have gambling. It's something that they have embraced. I think a lot of the people there have a kind of a tongue-in-cheek attitude about it, and they realize that maybe they believe, maybe they don't, but it brings tourists to town every July, and there's a festival, and there's a parade, and there's an alien on the top of the newspaper.
It's huge, man. That's the number one moneymaker there.
This right here, I was given when I was at the newspaper. It's an alien with a little Roswell Daily Record bag. So I mean, it's woven into the. I'm going to leave it here while we talk, but it's woven into the stuff. So was there pushback from anybody about your work, about the book, whether it was people from Roswell or outside? I mean, obviously there's people who are like, oh, it's all bullshit. But did you run into any stonewalling? Did you run into anybody trying to discredit you or the work that you were doing?
Absolutely.
Bring it. Tell me. What do you got?
That's the thing is you don't test the waters in this. You either jump in the pool or you don't. And you jump in the pool and you have any kind of a opposite view of what happens, people come after you. They try to assassinate you. Mm-hmm. I'm not gonna, because I don't, you see those guys, throughout the years that are all bickering back and forth and, writing stuff about each other and doing videos about each other and all that stuff. And I'm not even going to entertain that. I presented what is my assessment of it. I believe that the important people involved were the original core group prior to 1978 and Stanton Freeman stepping up and opening this can of worms. Mm-hmm. Anybody after that didn't have anything to do with what was going on, specifically. You look at the real people that orchestrated it, the real investigators that looked after it. And I stepped in with, 2015, 2020, perspective of, forensic statement analysis. So I don't care what anybody says, in the 1990s. What I want to look at is what was said and how was it presented back in 1947. Then I'm going to take a look at the investigators that interview and evaluate what happened in 1947 and how they went about doing it. And other than just, and I don't want to say they were hobbyists that were delving off into the investigation that now have become, I mean, you could consider them professional investigators because they make money off of it. And they use specific investigative techniques to do it. The main thing is let me ask you a question. Let's say you're married, and your wife ends up dead. And the police come to you and go, hey man, can you do us a favor? Investigate what happened and come back to us. Tell us what happened. We're like really busy over here.
I'd say, can you go talk to this guy who's in his basement, who's got these strings that go between he lives right next door. No, they would never, that's insane.
So why in the world would we rely on the United States Air Force to tell us the truth? They're the ones that created this whole lie. And we go, we want to open up an investigation. So you guys investigate yourself and tell us what happened.
Oh,
and then have no oversight, at least in Grudge, Blue Book, Project Sign, everything. They had somebody of a civilian type to oversee whether or not that this was being done credibly.
Right.
You have a Dr. Hynek that's there to kind of see what is going on and how they're doing things. And then all of a sudden in 1994, we request this through the GAO and we expect them to tell us the truth. I'm like, who's the idiot that's relying on this? And don't get me wrong, the Air Force officers that were given the responsibility to do this. That was a big job for them to do.
Mm-hmm.
But when I go in and look at how they did it, it was a mess. The transcripts were edited. You don't edit transcripts. If you edit a transcript, it turns it into a statement.
Mm-hmm.
So, where are the full transcripts of what happened? Why didn't they interview the only living general at the time that had said that, yeah, this was a cover up? They didn't even go, he had passed away at that point, but why didn't they even address his video statement? Colonel DuBose did a video statement, basically a deathbed confession. It wasn't deathbed, but it was shortly before he died. Why in the world didn't they look at that? They didn't look at it at all. In the report, they don't even refer to Colonel DuBose. Ended up being General DuBose at the time.
Well, there's one of those arguments that floats around that this was post-World War II. You're dealing with people who had just fought this massive war and didn't ask questions because they were told, you're not supposed to follow orders. I mean, my grandmother's last husband, and we'll just call him that, he was a CB, and he worked on bases that at the time they were told this is a secret base. He didn't work on Area 51. He worked on over in the Mediterranean, I believe. And he was told, he's like, this is top secret. You will keep this with you till the day you die and go build this thing. And we knew that he did it, but he wouldn't talk about it. And we're like, we see the documents, like they're unclassified. Right. These are not classified bases. And his attitude was like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because that's what he was instructed. So if you're coming out of that mindset and then suddenly there's whether or not it was a UFO, whether or not it was a crash, but they're being told, remember those oaths you took 5 years ago? We still have the same mindset. That's going to muddy those waters, so much and then I can see people doing deathbed confessions, but then you can't keep the real ones from the fake ones.
That's right.
It's just fake news all over the place.
Yeah, it's incredible. I was Walter Hott was the public information officer that released the press release to the Roswell Daily Record, and he ended up getting out getting out of the military shortly after that, and he was one of the men that was instrumental in getting the Roswell UFO Museum going with Glenn Dennis. And both those guys' stories, grew and grew and grew. And Walter Hott had a deathbed confession. Actually, it wasn't a deathbed confession per se. He did a statement and said, I don't want this opened until after I die. So he died. They opened it up, and all of a sudden, everything. They transported the aliens this way. They stored them in the hangar. Blanchard took him over there to look at them. He saw everything, and to do this at the end, for skeptical investigators looking at how all this happened, it's like, okay, well, why would he do that? And people say, well, he was afraid something would happen, the government. Well, why wouldn't he be afraid for the family that he left behind after he dropped this bomb? Why would he do that? And so there's just a lot of different questions. It's hard to figure out how someone feels and how their emotions are how they're going to process their emotions through something like this. And so you look at what Walter Hott finally put out, which is the whole thing, just like Glenn Dennis, just like some of the other ones. And there's just not a lot of support there. There is support for this obscure material after the crash and was collected, and we don't know where it went. We assume it went certain places. And so I come back in with forensic statement analysis and look at this. And that's where you end up seeing the verbiage changing. And then the real disingenuous stuff that came out was out of the Roswell report from the Air Force in 94 and 95, where these investigators were actually manipulating people's statements and influencing the witnesses, and I'm just sitting back going, wow, 1994, when they looked at this, nobody really looked at it. But now that we have all this video that we look at serial killers and spies and everything, you're videoing people and they're lying, and you see certain patterns in everybody the same way. It just makes you go, okay, these are cues of deception.
Right.
And I've had that happen to me. I've sat in front of a guy that I thought for sure committed this murder, and I'm interviewing him, and we're hitting him hard, and we're in there for 5 hours, and I'm like, this guy's lying to me. He's lying. Well, he was lying, not about the murder. He had nothing to do with the murder. He was lying to try to steer me away from his car that was parked in my parking lot because it had a bunch of dope in it. And he didn't want me anywhere near that car, right? So he's lying about where the car is, where the car was, whether he got the car cleaned. He's lying about all this stuff. And I find out later, well, yeah, he was lying, and the forensic statement analysis process worked on him. It just didn't tell me what lie he was lying about. It told me that he was lying.
Did you bust him for the dope?
No. But
There's
it's just goofy stuff like that. So
yeah,
I go in and I look at, somebody says, well, I'm going to investigate the Roswell crash. All right, well, were you a private investigator? Were you a police officer? Were you an insurance investigator? Were you any kind of investigator? You weren't. Okay. Well, so where are you getting your expertise? Well, it's right here. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. I'll just ask them those questions, and we talk about that.
There we go.
A little bit more
because
than
everybody's a professional scientist when it comes down to it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, so
the scientific method. I've used the scientific method. Yeah.
If I could touch it, it's real. There's the idea too that Project Blue Book kind of came out. It wasn't so much that they were trying to find an answer. It was the fact that all of these reports were gumming up the works for the military, and they were worried that the Soviets at the time were going to use it as a way to break the United States up, to cause mistrust, to cause all of this. So they needed to create some sort of mechanism that people could report it to, or so they could chase it down. So they knew it wasn't a Soviet craft, or if it wasn't just reports trying to make us look bad. So that factors into it too.
Sure.
How many dead ends did you run into where you started chasing down leads and you kind of thought that the method was working, and then you just ran into a flat dead end? And
so I wasn't trying to prove whether or not the Roswell incident happened. What I did prove, and I can continue to prove it based on factual testimonial evidence of the way that the investigators went about their case, that the government continues to lie to us.
No.
They have not come forward to tell us what really happened here. They continue to cover up. And what in the world would they need to cover up 70 plus years later? That's the confusing part to me, because there's only like two things when you're talking about declassifying documents. There's only about two things that that they'll never declassify in there. And so, and it's a very complex process. It's very convoluted, and you can look it up online. Just go in, how does the U.S. government declassify things, and it'll explain it.
Right.
But why in the world would they continue to do this? Is the confounding thing to me.
Because usually it means somebody's still alive that would get fingered by it. Because that's the argument now with they just declassified a lot of the JFK papers, but there's still a lot of it that's redacted and blacked out. And the argument is that means that there's somebody still alive or in power who would be tapped by this if the information came out. So that's a lot of times one of the reasons. But we're talking...
Or the organization, because, organizations outlive people. So the particular organization that, let's say, facilitated whatever this is, that was secretive, is still in operation. So they keep it redacted.
Yeah. So riddle me this, Batman. One of the things that always has kind of stuck with me with the whole story that I always shake my head at is the children's coffins. And I know that's kind of a random thing to throw out there, but for those of you who aren't familiar, there's a tale that somebody from the military went to the local undertaker and ordered children's coffins, or asked about them, what it would take, or could you make them, or whatever. And that's always bugged me, because I'm like, this is the military. They have access to, they don't need somebody to go to the local mortuary to get boxes. If nothing else, they put them in body bags. That's just kind of the military way of doing it. Did you run into that story? Did you chase that down at all?
I didn't chase it because it came from Glenn Dennis. I knew that.
Yeah. You didn't have to chase it.
So yeah, there's a lot of investigators out there that still will lend credibility to some of Glenn Dennis's story. I consider Glenn Dennis's story. I can't use it. It would be, if I was going before a grand jury and I was going to bring witnesses in before the grand jury to testify, I don't believe I would bring Glenn Dennis in for the simple fact that he's lied so much and then made up more lies to cover his lies, that it's like, well, is any of this going to be credible? And a defense attorney is going to destroy this guy. Is it going to damage my case more by bringing in nonsense? So I could see where the U.S. military at that time, 1947, would reach out to civilian entities for support. We still do that today. We have purchasing agreements and things like that. If Nimitz is going to get underway on Monday and it's Friday and we need a safe that will secure classified documents because the other safe hinge broke off and we can't weld it, we're getting a safe. And we're going to get it from a, whatever the source is in the Seattle area.
Right.
So there are those things. Now, the confusing thing about that is really more airmen were killed in World War II than any other service. You think they've dealt with dead bodies before? I don't think they're going to need to go to, the Glenn Dennis, the 19-year-old mortuary assistant or however old he was at the time, and say, hey, how do you preserve bodies out in the desert? Because, we just didn't get it right when we were fighting in North Africa for 2 years.
Exactly.
We need your expertise because you're the man.
Okay. And that's an interesting thing that you just said, because I've had several guests on who were philosophers of thought, Andy Norman, Lee McIntyre, and one of the things that always comes up is this idea with conspiracy theories that people need to feel special. Part of the reason that people buy into them is because they have to feel like they have information that nobody else has.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that kind of sounds like one of the possibilities for how these stories come from is, well, I am going to make myself important because I have a key to this entire puzzle and I'm going to get a book deal. Or I'm going to be on Art Bell, or, something like that.
The Salem witch trials, you look at that, you look at stuff that happened in, elementary school, and somebody got in trouble there and people came forward and said that they saw them, people are something else, man.
It's like your yogurt story. Like you were saying about the yogurt killings, 40 people said I did it. And it's like,
who would want to say that they raped, murdered, and burned a bunch of teenage girls? But 40 plus people did say that and admitted to it. And so those 40 people had to be investigated to the point to where they were proven that they couldn't have been there at the time.
Isn't that a crime though? Isn't that like interfering with
how many crimes are you going to chase out of this?
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's Alice in Wonderland going down a rabbit hole, and it's like, how do you, right now I want to say the federal government is dealing with over $100 billion in fraud for all this COVID stuff. They're not going to prosecute anybody on that.
If they didn't
That's
prosecute over the
$100 billion
housing crisis,
Yeah,
they didn't
well,
prosecute over the housing crisis. They're not going to do it over that.
no.
You know.
So because I mean, it's just like, how are you going to do this?
Yeah.
How many investigators are you going to hire to conduct a complete? It's mind boggling.
It's not going to happen.
No.
So did you now that you've the book, which the link is in the show notes, everybody go check it out, buy your copy of it, buy multiple copies of it. There you go. Look at that.
Yeah, it's a cool cover and everything.
Yeah. That actually
you can
is.
freeze frame this. Y'all can down in your
We'll make a
grandma's
poster of it. So did you find, now that you're finished with it and it's been out, and are you kind of like, cool, that's done? Do you feel like you've done your job?
Done.
Done.
Done, man.
Done. You're not going to get pulled back in. It's not going to become.
So I will be speaking at different conventions about it. I will be concentrating specifically on processes that I use to ferret out, the honesty out of the whole deal. Let me give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
When they were talking to Professor Moore, they're interviewing Professor Moore. He's in his 70s, and he's reminding them, hey, man, this is 50 years worth of memories here. You got to qualify what I'm saying. The investigator says this to Professor Moore. You're familiar with the popular literature of the various crash sites, 1 crash site, 2 crash sites, and all of that craziness. That right there is masterful manipulation. You're not only providing your witness some information that literature has been writing that there's multiple crash sites, but then you disqualify it by calling it all that craziness.
Mm-hmm.
And you as a person, Professor Moore as a person, an older person who's listening to this, officer in the U.S. Air Force calling it all this craziness, well, then you're not going to justify anything that you say that would support all that craziness. So these guys were master manipulators when they were doing their investigation. These are techniques that are taught how to manipulate witnesses, how to manipulate well, not so much witnesses, but suspects, but they used it on witnesses.
Mm-hmm.
It's just real interesting on how they did their investigation. I can go, more and more and more. After he says, hey, this is a lot of information, you need to qualify this. The Air Force follows up with a 97-word, 5-point statement consisting of no less than 5 questions in 1 sentence. I'm just like, wow, what are they trying to do to this guy? Right?
That's so governmental. It's just
God, it was crazy. I'm just sitting there reading this stuff, just going, So anyway, so that's what I did out of this investigation. Is I showed that it is not Air Force case closed. It's not. What they've done here is they've manipulated people further, and they've obscured what's really going on. I've been on the end of many internal affairs investigations. I get notified, hey, you're under investigations for internal affairs case, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Don't talk to anybody about this case. We'll contact you later and get a statement from you. So automatically your stress level goes up. You wait, weeks, if not months, before you actually go in and make your statement of whatever it is that they're investigating on. And when you do that, you sit down, and the investigators come in and sit down, and they slam, I don't know if you can see this, like 2 or 3 binders this thick in paperwork. Bam! This is the investigation. It's very imposing. It's like, oh my God, man, they talk to everybody. Well, most of that stuff is just a whole bunch of copies of a whole bunch of copies that has nothing to do with anything. It's like, okay, when did you check on duty this day, and where did you go and stuff like that. It didn't have anything to do with anything, but they make copies of everything, and it makes it this huge binder that's really impressive. But only about that much actually has anything to do with the investigation.
Yeah.
And that's what these guys did. Their investigation was almost 1,000 pages long. And most of it was gibberish having nothing to do with anything. And it's just, so anyway, that's where I come from. It's people prior to me, people have said this was wrong. What they did was, subterfuge.
Yeah.
Well, I came in and said, okay, y'all said that, and you can think that if you want to, but I have the documentation to prove it.
So do you feel kind of like that, and looking back, do you feel that you kind of created this work and you did the legwork? Now you're kind of handing it off and being like, okay, look, to the people that want to, this is what I did. I'm going to hang out with my guitars and enjoy my life. This is not going to become my life, but I did this and I'm trying to help the cause.
Yeah. And if I'm invited anywhere on any of this, I'm hoping maybe one day I'll speak in Roswell or whatever, because I'm not necessarily against saying that it was UFOs and aliens. I didn't say it wasn't UFOs and aliens. I'm saying the overwhelming evidence, physical evidence, does not support UFOs and aliens. The overwhelming amount of firsthand witnesses does not support aliens, and it supports a craft. But what I can support is the conspiracy that the United States Air Force continues. The United States government continues to not tell us the truth on this and tries to steer us in another direction.
It reminds me of kind of like an archaeologist is like discovering an artifact, and they go in with the brush and they're like getting rid of all the crap and be like, we don't need this, we don't need this, we don't need this. Right. And it kind of reminds me of that a little bit. Like you're going in and you're like, okay, this is garbage, this is garbage, this is garbage, let's go by. Okay, here's what I found, here's how I look at it, and good luck. It's just kind of like, it's like, I did my part. If you guys want to have the argument about it, here's a little bit clearer of a path that you can go on, because you don't need to worry about all this crap that I kind of cleared out of the way.
So many times investigators try to be everything to everyone, all answers. They go in, you watch the TV shows on a lot of ghost programs where they go in and they know everything about everything. Instead of going in, talking to people, having their thing, and then having specialists come in and do this. So I consider myself a specialist to come in, and I looked at the documentation, and yes, I said, this is inconsequential. This is inconsequential. This is inconsequential. This is a really cool story. I would love for this to be true, but this guy just came up and said this happened after he watched Unsolved Mysteries, and he wanted to be part of all this. So you have to look at all that. I came in as a specialist to call out a lot of the gibberish, like you said, and to provide a couple of things that people really need to look at in forensic statement analysis, and just go, look, I can prove this. That a gratification smile, a sociopath can't help it, man. They will sit there and look at you and say, I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. I got to get back to the work of the people.
Yep. Now watch this.
It's like that gratification smile. It's like, oh man,
I did it. Nobody saw me do it.
Yeah.
Nobody caught that smile.
These guys will say their long story. This is what happened. This is what happened. This is what happened.
Yeah. Isn't it the more detail they put into it, the more likely that it's not true, isn't it? Isn't that the case?
Well, that's something to consider. It's like body language. People say, well, they made too much eye contact. They didn't make enough eye contact. They used their hands too much. They kept touching their face when they would talk. They put their hand over their face. It all has to do, it can't be exclusive of itself.
Right.
It has to fall in line with a whole bunch of other things that happens. So just because somebody blinks too much or looks up to the left, they're, telling the truth. They look up to the right and they're, searching for creative answers, or whatever the gibberish is that somebody's going to come up with. Body language matters. Inflection matters. Tone matters. What they tell you matters. How much or how little matters. But it depends on whether you're a 70-year-old or you're a 19-year-old.
Yeah. Or if you're fighting that.
Yeah. That
you can train yourself not to do that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I do that too. I was on a date the other night and I noticed that she was asking me questions and I was looking off to like formulate an answer. Well, it wasn't that I was lying to her. It was, I want to make a good impression, make sure I get the story right. So I kind of looked off to get my thoughts together and then I would give the answer. But I wasn't lying to her, but somebody else, like a body language person, might be like, oh, wow, look the way he's looking up and to the left. He's like trying to fabricate a story. No, I'd had
Right.
2 beers. We were sitting in a loud bar and I wanted to make sure she understood what I was saying.
Right.
It's totally different.
Right.
You know, would
So
you?
yeah, it's all those things. And they have to kind of string together to make sense. It can't be just, because I have people all the time and I do seminars and stuff and they're like, well, how do we know when somebody's lying to us? And I was like,
Oh, you can't. That's why it's not admissible in court.
Somebody in your family's lying to you. You know, I don't know. There's so many different things that matter.
Yeah.
So
that's the old politician's joke. How do you know a politician's lying? Their lips are moving. Yeah. It's like that whole thing. Would you take this?
And this is what a lot of people that don't study in depth with a lot of things, you know, they look at it and go, yeah, well, you know, that's just the way people are. You look at like I have a subscription to Psychology Today. And I try to read 2 articles out of there every, you know, magazine I get. And one of them, the whole magazine was dedicated to deception and lying. And one of the psychologists that wrote part of the article was, it is part of American culture to lie. And we lie multiple times all day long. And we do it for different reasons. And the thing about it is a lot of these lies are culturally acceptable. What's the difference between a cult and a religion? The amount of followers, right? You know, if you're 10 guys sitting there waiting for the spaceship to come back and you're buying white Nikes and wearing black t-shirts and stuff like that, you're a cult. But if you believe in transubstantiation and that the bread and wine actually becomes the body of Christ and the blood of Christ, it actually happens, well, then you're a religion if you have 10 billion followers.
Yeah, that's the other. If your leader's dead or alive.
Yeah, what do we decide we're going to agree upon?
Yeah.
And, you know, does this jacket make me look fat? It's not a fair question.
Do you want to sleep on the couch?
Yeah. So, you know, it surrounds us all day long. Really try. And a bunch of this is just little, like you say, the little white lies. It's just, you know, it's just being nice, just being polite.
What about psychology of it though? Because like, there's the whole idea that our bodies and our senses lie to us because they can't take in all of the information that, like, when we see things, we don't see everything because we would go crazy. Our bodies just can't take all that in. It's kind of like there's the whole idea of you'll never notice red cars until you buy a red car, and then suddenly every other car out there is red. Well, no, it's just your body and your senses are now taking in information differently because you are heightened to the color red because you're buying a red car. You know, these people that you've interviewed, how many of them do you think believe, not the schizophrenic example that we talked about way at the beginning, but there are people literally who just kind of fill in the blanks and they're like, okay, well, yeah, I believe this. It must be true because A plus B equals C. Well, I don't have B, but it must be B because A plus B equals C. Right. Do you think you ran into that?
Absolutely. I have a great example of myself doing that. When I was in high school, I had a very, very close friend of mine. This person had a red car. It was a red Cutlass. We drove all over the place in this thing. I have it right now. I can see it in my mind pulling into Sonic. I can see myself hanging outside the car. It's red. I can see myself at the Walmart parking lot. That car is red. That was a blue car. This person showed me pictures of it.
But to you, it was, for some reason, it was red to you.
Somewhere So I would have been 14 to 18 years old. I'm 57 now. Somewhere in that 40 something years, that car became red. It was not. So, regardless of the people that are Roswell investigators and say that memories don't change, they absolutely do. Yeah. They change over time. You can influence them. Our brain is designed to make sense of our world, like you said. Our amygdalas are looking for faces and shapes that are going to create a fight or flight situation to protect us. My amygdalas will fire if I see something down to my right or down to my left that resembles a snake. I'll do that number, and it's a garden hose. We've all had those situations to where those things happen. So our brains do things that try to help us navigate our environment, try to help us make sense of what's around us, and try to help us stay safe.
Yeah, that's lizard brain just keeping us alive.
So. Yeah, that's right. Love me some lizard brain, boy.
So you told me when we first started, like you had an interest in ghosts, paranormal, Bigfoot, those kinds of things. Are there any other subjects out there that you would approach with the same type of investigation that are interesting to you? Do you want to go after Sasquatch and apply the same kind of logic to that, or a different subject?
So, yeah. So
are you done? You're like, I am never doing this again.
No. I've dealt with, and I have good friends of mine that are in the cryptid community and specifically Sasquatch and Bigfoot. Expedition Bigfoot. Russell Acord is a great guy. And I've got to hang out with him on multiple occasions, and we've talked all kinds of military stuff and Sasquatch. A lot of the cryptid stuff is very interesting to me. The ghost stuff is always interesting just because whenever I look at a ghost situation, I look at whether or not the story behind it has any supportive evidence of an event that may have happened there that would cause whatever is happening or influence people's perspective of what might happen to them while they're there.
Did someone die? Was there a violent event? Did something?
Yeah, you have they have ghost investigations at places that nobody's ever died. It's a really cool abandoned building, whatever it is, but nobody's ever died there. And they'll get together and they'll charge $40 a head and have 20 people come into this location and hunt ghosts in there. So there's the question of, are we looking for the ghost that is stuck there? Are we looking just for a spiritual location that may lend itself more to being able to contact the spirit realm? Is it, what is it? Is it 20 people that get together, create some sort of, like-minded people get together and create some sort of situation, some sort of environment that would create a hole or a calling or something for a spirit to come and do that? I mean, there's no end to the speculation and theories of what might happen. So that's the cool part about me, is I'm interested in all weird human experience. Yeah. I tend to gravitate more toward mental hospitals because I was a mental health investigator. I gravitate more to military battles and forts and those sorts of things because I was in the military and I understand that. I gravitate towards cemeteries because I'm very interested in cemeteries and church graveyards because I was raised Catholic. I'm a recovering Catholic at this point. But, so there's certain things that I'm really interested in. That what I do is people ask me all the time, what do you do? You a ghost hunter? You a cryptid guy? What do you do? No, I'm a professional investigator, and I look at the situations that people pose and apply an industry standard method of doing that investigation instead of just, groping in the dark.
Yeah. Did you see the Sasquatch miniseries on Hulu about the the guy said that he heard the story about Sasquatch had killed a bunch of people.
Yeah.
And it turned out that it was actually a drug deal.
No, but I think that's fantastic.
You should check it out, because it actually also has to do with what we were talking about false memories. And it comes down to this reporter had, when he was a kid, he got a job of cutting weed in Humboldt County, and then he heard a story that Sasquatch had killed a couple of people, and like 30 years later he went back and tried to track it down, and then he started running into all these people of, well, this is what I remember.
Right.
It turned out it was a drug deal, and then it turns into this whole other like murder mystery. But it's really fascinating how people were forgetting details, but then they would mold them together in order to make a history that they could wrap their minds around. And it really, you should check it out. It really plays into like what you were talking about that.
What's it called again?
So it's called Sasquatch. It's on Hulu.
Okay.
It's like 4 episodes. It gets a little dramatic at the end, a little overly theatrical, but it's definitely I'd recommend it. It's a good afternoon of fun.
My big Sasquatch outing, my big Bigfoot outing, I guess, when I really made an effort, I was stationed up in Alaska. And back then, this was in 82, 83, 84, something like that. And back then, we didn't have internet. And so you actually had to go and look up things through things called books at a place called the library. And these libraries would have encyclopedias and stuff like that. But also there were historical societies in different places. Mm-hmm. So when I was up in Alaska, I looked at a bunch of stuff. I wasn't a real book nerd, but I would make the effort to go try to find stuff. And one of the things that was very interesting to me was there was a series of murders that was attributed to Sasquatch in a place called Portlock, Alaska. And I just so happened to be at the Morale, Welfare, and Recreation Center in Seward, Alaska. It's like it's just like a recreation center that the military would send you to. And so I got sent there during a week. And during the week, mainly on the weekends, there were Coast Guard little 32-foot boats that 2 Coast Guardmen would take military people out in Seward Bay to go fishing. Well, during the week, there wasn't hardly any of the military people there. It was primarily during the weekend. And so I was there, and I went and talked to this 19-year-old seaman and this, 20-year-old petty officer. And I told them the story about these attacks at Portlock. And I said, how far do you guys go? How far do you go out? And their trips were usually 10 to 12 hours. And so these 2 guys agreed, and we went to Portlock. And it took us a long time to get there because it's, you can imagine these military boats weren't real fast. Yeah. Anyway, we get out there. We spent a couple hours just walking around in this area where quite a few people were killed over amount of time. And in 1 year, the whole village just packed up and left. And there was an article written in the Anchorage newspaper about the Sasquatch murders, and that's why this whole town left. So it's a very interesting location. So when I got there, we walked around out there, and I went and found what I believed to be the cemetery that was there. And it was a cannery town, and most of the buildings were either gone or collapsed, but there was a lot of, and this happened in 1949 when the town basically closed down and everybody left.
Okay. And you were there in the 90s?
In 84, probably.
84. Okay.
And, so it's just really interesting looking for that. And of course, I'm walking around out there going, wow, this is not where you want to be at this time of the year, because there's just trails all over that place with bear scat everywhere. So there's all kinds of bear in that area. I mean, obviously it used to be a cannery town, so you have some rivers that come in there. There's a lot of salmon runs, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So naturally bear would gravitate to this area and would make a lot of sense. But it's a very, very compelling and interesting. It's been on TV a couple of times, these different things.
I've never heard. I grew up in the Northwest. I never heard of that.
So Portlock, Alaska, or Port Chatham.
Did you track? So after you went and visited, did you go and do any research on it and try and track?
Oh yeah,
down?
yeah, I did. But there's not much to be found. I did some research last year on it just because, we couldn't get out because of COVID and all that stuff. So I made some contacts in some historical societies up in Alaska, and there's an actual cannery initiative up there, where a group of people are trying to gather information about all the different canneries. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of canneries that were operating in Alaska. Many of these they'd start up and only operate maybe for a season, then shut down. Some of them operated for years. So this one that I'm talking about, Portlock, it actually had a U.S. Post Office there. So it was there for years. And that U.S. Post Office was one of the last things that shut down in that town before they all left. And so through that cannery initiative, I tracked down who actually owned the cannery. But the problem is a lot of those documents don't exist anymore. And if they do, they're in private hands, and they're not sharing why the cannery was shut down. So that's what I was really looking at was, did they shut the cannery down because they were moving it like they moved so many others, and they were just, it was just played out? Because in the 1950s, were a lot of these canneries actually switching to big ship canneries, and it just wasn't feasible to have one cannery located on land, and they just started using larger ships and just doing the processing on the ships at that point? I don't know.
They were also a lot of, because I grew up in Northwest Washington, like literally on the ferry system that went up to Alaska. And every summer I would know a number of kids who would go up to Alaska to work on the canneries. And every year somebody came back with like one less finger but they also came back with $100,000 in their pocket because it was all cash. But you heard stories about the way that these places were run. A lot of them were fly by night. A lot of them would disappear really quick because they would have problems. Maybe they weren't on the up and up. Right. So, I mean, it could have been that. It could have been like somebody could have died there, and from malfeasance or from,
Well, for sure, several people died there. There was actually a chromite mine there that started during World War II. And so they're saying, there was a big deal about, well, there's a lot of these guys that come up there and work the chromite mine, and they disappear.
Cover story.
Yeah. Number one, why are they working in a mine during World War II? So obviously they can't get in the military, or they're not drafted.
Yeah.
They're not from the area. And so they're shipped up there. They get up there and they want to go take a hike in the woods. You go hunt Dall sheep, buy you a rifle, and go hunt a sheep up in the mountains. You're going to die. If you don't know what you're doing at that time, you're going to die.
Yeah.
And so those things did happen. There was logging there that happened. And, so naturally, these guys' bodies would show up later all mauled and chewed up in the rivers and stuff like that. And it's like, maybe there was a serial killer working there. Maybe there was a really angry Sasquatch, and he was, killing everybody there. Maybe it was just out of accidents, and these people just didn't know. Maybe the mines or the logging people, somebody died and they hid the body because they didn't want to deal with whatever the problem is. There's so many different things.
Okay, so I got one more question, one more topic to ask you about, and then we'll start wrapping it up. But now that I've got you talking,
yes, I am married. Thank you for asking.
Well, I'm sorry, everyone. Sorry, the dating part of the show is over. I had a dating expert on the show once, and I'll call Bethany and I'll be like, he doesn't need your help. He's doing okay. Oak Island. Have you ever looked into that whole thing? Has that ever caught your interest?
I love Oak Island, man. I think that's
before really the show, though, right? You were into it before the show.
So I knew about Oak Island before the show. I knew about Roanoke, and I was real interested in Roanoke. So I'm real interested in Doggerland, which this is kind of off subject, sort of, but so my DNA went, out of Africa to the Middle East, and then hops straight over into Scandinavia. It's like, okay, how did that DNA hop from, I'm Kurdish, Druze, and then all of a sudden Scandinavian. That's bizarre. And
that makes sense. Actually, it does actually make sense.
Of course,
I'm the angry Viking. So my family we've done the research.
Yeah. The Vikings went to the Middle East, picked up some women and came back.
Absolutely.
And so
we had Muslim Vikings.
Yes, absolutely. So I get all that. So then it jumps from Scandinavia into England and Ireland. But before that, it's actually in Doggerland. Now we're talking we're talking old Ice Age stuff, because Doggerland is actually in the North Sea between Scandinavia and Ireland. It's a big valley there. And in the late 1800s, early 1900s, fishermen started using drop nets down to the bottom and getting these bottom fish, right? They were using the nets up at the top, and then they started, hey, there's stuff down there too. And they started dragging up stuff, and they'd drag up mammoth bones. They would drag up, spear tips and pieces of what you would believe to be like parts of dwellings and things like that. And these fishermen were freaking out about it. Well, now we know that there was a huge society that lived in there. So I'm real interested. I'm a scuba diver. I'm a master scuba diver. I've dove all over the place, and I'm very, very interested in pre-Ice Age civilizations that would be 70, 80 feet deep right now in the ocean. And they were there. And, we always love living next to the beach, right? Everybody loves the beach. So we had plenty of beaches, 20,000 years ago, 40,000 years ago, that people were living at. And one of the real interesting ones is Dwarka. They actually believe that off the coast of India, that possibly the city that Krishna lived in is actually in the Indian Ocean at this point. And
I was just reading about that.
Yeah, the Indian government isn't allowing anybody to go in there and do any excavations or anything. It's like 70, 80 feet. Right. It's not very deep at all.
No, it's right off there.
I saw some of that stuff when I was in Egypt. Can you hear that?
I can. Loud? What is that? It sounds like an airplane.
Yeah. It's my wife. She's closing the door right now.
Oh, garage. So as a diver, have you ever seen anything that you've been like really impressed by or weren't able to write off as just natural?
Sure. Are we talking ancient stuff?
I don't know, like off Japan. There's those plateaus off Japan, supposedly in the water. I mean, stuff where you look at it and you're like, this isn't natural. That
doesn't make any sense. So there's a lot of that stuff in the Mediterranean, obviously, from different levels, because the Mediterranean has gone different levels. Also, some of the things that have happened is in the Red Sea, a lot of that stuff in the Red Sea. I've dove the Red Sea quite a bit. I think the most interesting stuff would have been in Alexandria. I did some diving when I was in Egypt in Alexandria, and you can see plateaus and different levels of rock. When I was on I didn't see any like sculptures or anything, but when I was on a ferry boat, we were doing a prisoner transport. And on my way back, you could see down in the water, where the Nile comes out in one area. I can't remember exactly where we were between, Cairo and Alexandria. And it was like brackish water, and you could see, some, statuary down there. And I'm like, look at this. This stuff is everywhere. And I thought people knew what it was. And come to find out, in the 1990s, I see an article, and and that's what they're talking about, is what me and a bunch of the other soldiers were seeing in the water, and we paid no attention to it. And it was part of the Library of Alexandria.
Oh, wow.
And we just went right by it and just didn't think twice of it. Yeah, it's bizarre.
Oh, that's a whole other show. I'm gonna wrap this up. I hate to, because there's so many other things I'd love to ask you about, but I'm gonna wrap it up. Where can people find you? Obviously, we're gonna put the book in the show notes so people can click on that and go get their multiple copies. But where else can they track you down?
TheParanormalDetective.com or authorgreglawson.com. That's the best place.
All right, we're gonna put those links in there.
I got
too.
Instagram and Facebook and all that.
I'm so glad I ran across you. I heard your interview and I'm like, I have got to talk to this guy. And I really appreciate you spending the time with me, not writing me off and being like, oh, some nut guy used to write for the Roswell Daily Record.
No, that's great, man.
No, I had a lot of fun. I really appreciate the time. I know it's valuable. So thanks. Everybody check you out. It's been a great experience. I learned a lot, and I'd love to talk to some of your cryptid friends, quite honestly. So if you want, send them my way. Send them my way.
Support comes from the Histories Train Wrecks podcast that focuses on stories like a temper tantrum that changed history, the president who promised not to run again and regretted it for the rest of his life, the World War II general who lost his pants on a secret mission in enemy territory. The Histories Train Wrecks podcast, available now.
Hey everybody, hope you enjoyed the show. Help us spread the word by subscribing and leaving a review. If you want to support us even more, you can find a link to our Patreon account in the show notes. And if you're one of our diehard fans, head on over to the VikingDogStore.com, where you can find official Open Highway merchandise to show your support to the entire world. But most of all, thanks for listening.
For the highways of America, which for so many years were an assortment of as many designs and pavements as there were states, are now becoming one big road that can take you anywhere faster, safer, and more directly than ever before. What is this big road? Where is it going? How much has been built? How much is yet to come? These are questions we ask. Certainly traveling the entire system would be a memorable experience, but few of us have the time for such a trip.
Copyright Viking Dog 2022. All rights reserved. The Open Highway is a trademark of Viking Dog LLC.